Get out of here! Get out of here and never come back again!
They threw her clothes into the rain before her husband's grave was even dry. One wrapper landed in the mud. One pair of old sandals floated near the gutter. Her cooking pot rolled across the compound like a broken drum, and the people who had eaten from that pot for many years stood there and laughed. The old woman did not scream. She did not curse. She did not fight. She only stood under the gray sky, holding her late husband's walking stick with both hands, while the rain soaked through her black funeral cloth. Her name was Adjoa Mensa, but everyone in the town of Akwansuo called her Mama Adjoa. Everyone except the people who hated her. To them she was not Mama. To them she was only the barren woman. Uncle Kwaku, her husband's elder brother, stood at the doorway of the house and pointed at her as if she were a thief. "Take your things and leave," he shouted. "This house belongs to the Mensa bloodline. You gave my brother no child. You have no son to stand here. You have no daughter to cry for you. You have no root in this family." The words hit her harder than the rain. Around the compound, neighbors gathered under umbrellas and zinc roofs. Some covered their mouths. Some shook their heads. Some whispered that what Uncle Kwaku was doing was cruel. But nobody stepped forward. Because cruelty becomes powerful when good people decide to watch quietly. Mama Adjoa looked at the doorway, then at the rooms inside. That house was not just walls and cement. She had carried water to mix the mortar when she was young. She had sold smoked fish to buy the first wooden door. She had planted the mango tree in the yard with her own hands. She had scrubbed that floor when her knees were strong, and later when her knees began to ache. She had laughed inside that house. She had prayed inside that house. She had buried her tears inside that house. And only yesterday she had followed the coffin of the man who built it with her. Pa Kofi Mensa. Her husband. Her only true friend. "Please," Mama Adjoa said, her voice trembling. "Let me sleep here one more night. Tomorrow I will go wherever God leads me." Uncle Kwaku laughed. "Where was your God when your womb was empty?" A few people gasped. Even the rain seemed to fall more softly for a moment, as if heaven itself had heard the insult. But Uncle Kwaku was not finished. "You enjoyed my brother's house for 35 years, he said. "Enough. You came with nothing. You gave nothing. You leave with nothing." Mama Adjoa lowered her eyes. A woman from the crowd whispered, "But she cooked for this family. She cared for Pa Kofi when he was sick." Uncle Kwaku turned sharply. "Did she give him a child? Answer me. Did she give him a child?" Silence swallowed the compound. Then a younger woman named Efua, Uncle Kwaku's daughter, stepped forward with a metal trunk. She opened it and began throwing Mama Adjoa's clothes into the mud. "Go and live with the children you claim you fed in the market," Efua said. "Let them come and save you." The crowd laughed nervously. But Mama Adjoa did not laugh. Something in her eyes moved, like a candle struggling against wind. The children she had fed. The children nobody remembered. The children everybody had ignored. For 30 years, while the town called her barren, Mama Adjoa had been feeding children who had no names on birth certificates, no parents at school meetings, no place at family tables. She had fed them behind the market. She had washed their wounds. She had bought their books. She had stayed awake while they burned with fever. She had called them son when the world called them nuisance. She had called them daughter when the world called them burden. But on that rainy funeral morning, none of them were there. At least that was what everyone thought. Because before that same sun would set, 3 black cars would stop in front of that muddy compound. 3 rich men would step out. 3 men whose names made bankers stand up straight and politicians answer phone calls. And in front of the same people who mocked her, they would kneel in the mud, bow their heads and call the barren woman mother. But before fate opened that door, the story had to return to the beginning. Long before the rain. Long before the funeral. Long before the insult. There was a young woman named Adjoa with bright eyes, strong arms, and a laugh that could make tired market women smile. She was not born rich. Her mother sold tomatoes. Her father repaired bicycles. But Adjoa had a heart that did not know how to pass suffering without stopping. If a child cried near her stall, she gave the child water. If an old woman dropped her basket, Adjoa picked it up. If a stranger arrived in a Kwansua with no place to sit, Adjoa made space. People said she was too soft for this world. But Pa Kofi, then only a young carpenter with sawdust on his shirt and hope in his pocket, said softness was not weakness. Adjoa, he told her once, some people are hard because the world broke them. But some people remain kind because God placed a well inside them. Adjoa laughed and told him he talked too much. He married her under a mango tree with palm wine village songs, and a promise so simple that everyone remembered it. I cannot promise gold, Kofi said, holding her hand. But I promise that wherever I sleep you will have a home. Whatever I eat you will have a share. Whatever God gives me, I will not hide it from you. Adjoa answered, and wherever you grow old I will grow old beside you. The whole town clapped. For the first year they were happy in a way poor people understand deeply. Happiness was not abundance. Happiness was one lantern burning at night. It was 2 plates of rice instead of 1. It was a husband coming home with plantain wrapped in newspaper because he remembered his wife loved it roasted. It was a wife saving the sweetest orange for him because he worked under the sun all day. They built their small shop near the market, then slowly built their house behind it. 1 room became 2. 2 became 3. A veranda appeared. A mango tree grew in the yard. Children from the neighborhood ran through the compound, and Adjoa would laugh and shout, "Do not break my clay pot." Then she would secretly give them roasted groundnuts. Everyone believed children would soon fill her own home. The first year passed. Then the second. Then the third. No child came. At first people spoke softly. Maybe next year. God's time is best. Let her drink this herb. Let her visit that prayer woman. Adjoa tried everything that did not insult her soul. She visited clinics. She fasted. She prayed. She swallowed bitter herbs that made her stomach turn. She smiled at every naming ceremony, even when she returned home and cried into her pillow. Kofi would sit beside her and place his hand on her back. "Adjoa, you are enough," he would whisper. But the world does not always allow a woman to be enough. By the 7th year the whispers sharpened. At the well, women lowered their voices when she approached. At family gatherings, aunties asked questions with fake sympathy. "When will we hear a baby crying in this house? Have you gone to the big hospital? Are you sure the problem is not from your side?" They never asked Kofi. In their minds, the empty cradle belonged only to the woman. One afternoon, Uncle Kwaku visited Kofi at the carpentry shed. "You are still young," he said. "Take another wife. Quietly. Nobody will blame you. A man must leave children behind." Kofi stopped sanding the chair in front of him. "My wife is not a broken calabash to be thrown away," he said. Kwaku frowned. "You speak like a man under a spell." "No," Kofi said. "I speak like a man who knows what love is." Kwaku never forgave him for that answer. And from that day, he watched Adjoa with a quiet bitterness, as if her empty womb had stolen something from him personally. But life continued. Adjoa kept selling in the market. Kofi kept building furniture. Their house stood warm and clean, though the room they had prepared for a child remained empty. Then one rainy evening, fate brought the first child to their door. The market was closing. Traders were tying sacks. The smell of wet earth rose from the road. Adjoa had just covered her tomatoes with a piece of plastic when she heard a sound behind the yam stall. It was not a cry exactly. It was the kind of sound a hungry child makes when he has cried so long that his body has no strength left. Adjoa moved the baskets aside. There, curled against a broken crate, was a boy of about 7. His shirt was torn. His knees were dusty. His eyes were too large for his face. "Child," Adjoa said softly, "where is your mother?" The boy stared at her and said nothing. Where is your father? Still nothing. Are you hungry? At that word, his lips trembled. Adjoa took the food she had packed for herself, rice and contamire stew wrapped in leaves, and placed it in front of him. The boy did not wait for a spoon. He ate like someone afraid the food would disappear. Adjoa watched him and something opened in her chest. Not pity. Pity looks down. This was something deeper. This was recognition. A lonely heart had found another lonely heart. What is your name? She asked. The boy swallowed. Kwame. Kwame what? He shook his head. Only Kwame. That night, Adjoa brought him home. Kofi stood at the doorway and looked from the boy to his wife. She expected questions. She expected worry. Instead, Kofi said, "Have you bathed?" The boy shook his head. Kofi nodded. Then we start there. No child sleeps in my house with market dust on his feet. Adjoa smiled for the first time in many days. Kwame stayed for one night. Then 2. Then 1 week. Nobody came looking for him. Adjoa went to the market women. Nobody knew his family. Kofi went to the police station. Nobody had reported a missing child. Some said the boy had been following lorries from town to town, begging for food. Others said his parents had died on the road. Nobody knew the truth. So Adjoa did what she had always done. She made space. Kwame did not speak much at first. He slept with one eye half open. He hid food under his mat. When thunder came, he crawled under the bed. But little by little, love did what shouting could never do. He began to trust. He began to smile. He followed Kofi to the carpentry shed and watched wood become chairs, doors, tables, and beds. One afternoon, Adjoa found him drawing houses in the sand with a stick. Not ordinary houses. Big houses with stairs, windows, balconies, courtyards, gardens, and roofs that curved like folded wings. Who taught you to draw like this? She asked. Kwame shrugged. I see them in my head. Kofi looked at the drawings and whistled. This boy does not have sawdust in his blood, he said. He has buildings. Adjoa laughed. From that day she saved every coin she could. When Kwame was old enough for school, she enrolled him using the name Kwame Mensah. The headmaster frowned. Is he your child? Adjoa lifted her chin. He eats in my house. He sleeps under my roof. He answers when I call. What more should a child be? The headmaster said nothing. But the town said many things. They are collecting children now? Maybe she wants to hide her shame. Feeding another woman's child does not make you a mother. Adjoa heard everything. She kept cooking. Years passed. Kwame grew tall. He became clever with measurements, shapes, and designs. His teachers said he needed technical school in the city. The fees were heavy. Too heavy. That night, Adjoa opened the small box where she kept her wedding earrings. They were not pure gold, but they were the only jewelry she owned. Kofi saw her holding them. Adjoa, he said gently, those earrings are yours. She looked at the sleeping boy in the next room. And the future is his. She sold the earrings the next morning. Kwame left for the city with one small bag, 2 shirts, a pair of sandals, and tears he tried to hide. At the lorry station he hugged Adjoa tightly. One day, he whispered, I will build you a house bigger than the chief's palace. Adjoa laughed through her tears. I already have a house, she said. No, he said. You have a house. I will build you a home the world cannot throw you out of. Those words would sleep for many years. But fate does not forget words spoken with tears. After Kwame left, the room became quiet again. Adjoa missed the sound of his feet. She missed the way he scratched his head when solving sums. She missed finding charcoal drawings on the back of old newspapers. The town expected her sadness to swallow her. Instead, another child came. It happened during Harmattan, when dust hangs in the air and the evenings smell of smoke. Adjoa was returning from the clinic after buying medicine for Kofi's cough when she saw a crowd near the roadside. A woman had collapsed with a small boy beside her. By the time help arrived, the woman was gone. The boy stood there, holding the edge of her cloth, unable to understand why she would not wake up. He was maybe 8. His name was Malik. He had a thin face, serious eyes, and a long scar across his chest, a scar that looked like an old river drawn on his skin. Nobody knew his relatives. Some said his mother had come from the north to find work. Some said she had been a cleaner at a roadside chop bar. By evening the crowd had scattered. The body had been taken away. The boy remained. Adjoa stood before him. "Malik," she said softly, "have you eaten today?" The boy shook his head. And again Adjoa made space. Malik was different from Kwame. Kwame had drawn houses. Malik asked questions. Why does fever make the body hot? Why does blood come out red? Why does the heart beat faster when we run? Why do some people die when others live? Kofi would laugh and say, "This one will worry doctors until they give him their coat." But Malik's health was weak. Sometimes he woke at night struggling to breathe. Sometimes he pressed his hand against the scar on his chest and turned pale. The clinic nurse told Adjoa he needed special care in the regional hospital. The cost was heavy. Again too heavy. By then Kofi's business had slowed. Imported furniture was coming from the city. People wanted shiny things, not handmade things. The shop brought in little money. But Adjoa did not count only money. She counted life. She began washing clothes for richer families at night. After selling in the market all day, she would sit behind people's houses, scrubbing school uniforms, bedsheets, and curtains until her fingers wrinkled and cracked. She hid it from Malik because she did not want him to feel like a burden. But children see more than adults think. One night, Malik woke and found her rubbing ointment on her swollen hands. "Mama," he whispered. She froze. It was the first time he called her that. He walked to her and took her hand. "Is it because of my hospital?" Adjoa smiled. "No, my child. These hands are old." "They are not old," he said. "They are tired because of me." She pulled him close. "Listen to me, Malik. A hand that is tired from saving a child is not a cursed hand. It is a blessed hand." He cried into her lap. Years later, when he became a doctor, those words would still live inside him. Malik studied with a hunger that frightened lazy people. He won scholarships. He read by lantern light. He traveled to the city, then to the university, then beyond the country for training. Before he left, he knelt before Adjoa and Kofi. "I will come back," he said. "I will build a clinic where no mother has to choose between food and medicine." Adjoa placed her hand on his head. "Go with God," she said. "But do not let success make your heart forget the road home." Malik shook his head. How can a heart forget the hand that held it? The second room became quiet. The third child came from the courthouse. Adjoa had gone there to settle a small dispute over a market stall. As she left, she saw a boy sleeping on a bench under the veranda, using a pile of old newspapers as a pillow. He was thin, dark, and quiet, with eyes that watched everything. A court clerk shouted at him. "Kojo! Get away from here. This is not your father's house." The boy gathered his newspapers and stood. Adjoa noticed that he did not beg. He simply moved like someone used to being moved away. "What are you reading?" she asked him. The boy held up a torn newspaper. "The law pages," he said. "Can you understand them?" "Some words," he answered. "Not all." "Why do you read law pages?" His eyes hardened. "Because people cheat poor people with papers." Adjoa stood still. There was a whole life inside that sentence. Kojo's parents had died when he was young. An uncle had taken their small land using a thumbprint Kojo later believed was forged. Since then, Kojo had slept wherever night found him. But he had learned one thing: papers could steal a life and papers could also protect one. Adjoa brought him home that evening. Kofi looked at him and smiled wearily. "Another one?" Adjoa smiled back. "This one came with newspapers." Kofi laughed. Then we must be careful. He may sue us if we serve him small portions. Kojo did not smile that day. But 3 weeks later, when Kofi made that joke again, he laughed so hard that rice nearly came out of his nose. Kojo was the quietest of them all. He kept his things folded neatly. He asked before taking water. He apologized even when he was not wrong. Adjoa understood. Some children become quiet because the world has punished them for needing anything. She taught him to ask without shame. Kofi taught him to stand straight. At school, Kojo was brilliant, but fees became a problem again. By then, Adjoa had nothing left to sell except time and strength. So she sold those. She woke earlier. She cooked for market women. She took in mending. She walked long distances to save transport money. She told no one. When Kojo passed his exams, he brought the result slip home with trembling hands. "Mama," he said, "I passed." Adjoa took the paper and stared at it as if it were a newborn child. Kofi put on his spectacles upside down, pretended to read it, and declared, "This paper says our Kojo will frighten judges one day." Kojo smiled. "I do not want to frighten judges," he said. "I want to frighten liars." Kofi raised his hands. "Then may all liars start shaking now." Years later, Uncle Kwaku would remember that sentence. And he would shake. But time has a way of separating people before bringing them back. Kwame became busy in the city. Letters came at first, then fewer. He entered construction, then real estate, then contracts so large that newspapers began calling him a rising builder. But he kept searching for Mama Adjoa's address after old market roads changed and the post office misplaced letters. Malik studied medicine. His training carried him far, from Accra to London to Johannesburg and back. He sent money through people he trusted, but not all money arrived. Some was stolen by middlemen. Some went to old addresses. He promised himself he would return properly when he became established. Kojo became a lawyer after years of hunger, study, and stubborn prayer. He searched court records for the boy he once was and for the woman who saved him. But Mama Adjoa had never registered any formal adoption. To the world of papers she had no children. To fate she had many. Meanwhile in Akwansuo the town still saw only one thing. Mama Adjoa had not given birth. That was enough for people who love simple cruelty. Her husband, Kofi, grew older. His cough deepened. His hands trembled when he held a chisel. Some mornings he sat under the mango tree and watched Adjoa sweep the yard. "You have carried too much," he told her one day. She leaned on the broom and smiled. "You carried me too." He shook his head. "I should have protected you more from my family." "You protected me," she said. "You loved me when others measured me." Kofi looked toward the empty road. "They will come after this house when I die." Adjoa's smile faded. "Do not talk like that." "It is true," he said. "Kwaka has wanted it for years. He thinks because we have no child in the family register, everything should return to him." Adjoa sat beside him. "What can we do?" "I have spoken to lawyer Biney," Kofi said. "He is preparing papers. This house will be yours. And after you, it will become what it has always been in spirit." Adjoa looked at him. "What do you mean?" Kofi pointed around the compound. "This house has raised children the town forgot. Let it continue. Let it become a home for abandoned children. Not a place of pity. A place of dignity." Tears filled her eyes. "Kofi." He took her hand. "We could not fill it with children from your womb. So God filled it with children from your mercy." A week later he wrote a letter. His handwriting shook, but his mind was clear. He wrote that the house belonged to his wife, Adjoa Mensah. He wrote that no relative had the right to remove her. He wrote that documents were already being prepared to place the property under a trust called the Forgotten Children's House. He wrote that his relatives should not mistake silence for weakness. Lawyer Biney sealed the letter in a brown envelope. "I will return after my treatment," the lawyer said. "Keep calm. Everything will be completed." But life does not always wait for papers. Lawyer Biney fell ill while away. Kofi's sickness worsened. And one quiet morning, as the first call to prayer floated from the far side of town and church bells began to answer, Kofi Mensah reached for his wife's hand and whispered his last words. Adjoa, do not believe them. You were never empty. The funeral was held the next week. People came in black and red. They cried loudly. They praised Kofi as a good man, a generous man, a man of peace. Uncle Kwaku wept so dramatically that some women shook their heads in admiration. But Mama Adjoa did not have energy for performance. She sat beside the coffin like a woman whose shadow had been cut away. After the burial, before the mourners had even finished eating, Uncle Kwaku called a family meeting. Not to comfort her. To remove her. He arrived with Efua, 2 nephews, and a man in dark glasses who claimed to be a property consultant. Mama Adjoa, he said with false softness, you know our customs. Since you and our brother had no child, this house must return to the family. Adjoa stared at him. Kofi said. Kofi is dead, Kwaku interrupted. The room went cold. Efua clicked her tongue. A widow should not argue with family elders. Adjoa looked toward the wooden trunk where Kofi used to keep documents. It was missing. Where is the trunk? She asked. Kwaku avoided her eyes. What trunk? The brown trunk from our bedroom. Efua smiled. Maybe your memory is also mourning. That was when Mama Adjoa understood. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a plan. They had entered the house while she was at the graveside. They had taken the trunk. They had taken the papers. They had taken her husband's voice from the room and now wanted to take her roof. She stood slowly. Kwaku, fear God. He laughed. God did not give you children. Do not bring him into property matters. Then came the rain. Then came the thrown clothes. Then came the words that cut deeper than knives. You have no child. You have no root. You leave with nothing. Mama Adjoa spent that night under a torn plastic sheet behind Auntie Aba's vegetable stall. Auntie Aba was a round woman with a sharp tongue and a loyal heart. She had sold vegetables beside Adjoa for almost 40 years. When she found Mama Adjoa sitting in the rain, she shouted so loudly that the goats scattered. Are they mad? Have they eaten wickedness for supper? She dragged Adjoa into her stall, wrapped her in dry cloth, and made her drink hot ginger tea. You will sleep in my room, Auntie Aba said. No, Adjoa whispered. I do not want to trouble you. Aba put her hands on her hips. Woman, if you say that again, I will beat you with this bunch of garden eggs. Trouble is when wicked people prosper. Helping you is not trouble. Adjoa tried to smile, but tears came instead. For the first time since Kofi died, she cried loudly. Not the quiet tears of a widow trying to be strong. Deep tears. Old tears. Tears for the empty room. Tears for the children who had gone far away. Tears for the husband who had promised her a home. Tears for the town that saw her hands but never counted what those hands had done. Auntie Aba sat beside her and let her cry. Sometimes the most spiritual thing a person can do is not to preach, but to sit beside pain without running away. By morning, the whole market knew what had happened. Some traders were angry. Some were afraid. Some said, it is family matter. That sentence has buried many injustices. Uncle Kwaku moved quickly. He changed the locks on the house. He put a sign on the gate that read, property for sale. He told people the old woman had voluntarily left. He said she was confused with grief. He said the family had every legal right. But his biggest lie was still coming. 3 days later, Mama Adjoa was served with a court notice. Auntie Aba could not read English well, so she took it to a teacher. The teacher adjusted his glasses and frowned. It says Mama Adjoa is being accused of unlawfully occupying and attempting to claim family property. Auntie Aba nearly dropped her basket. Unlawfully occupying? The woman who lived there 35 years. The teacher continued. There will be a hearing in 14 days. If she cannot provide ownership documents, the family can proceed with sale. Mama Adjoa sat very still. 14 days. 14 days to prove a life. The funeral was held the next week. People came in black and red. They cried loudly. They praised Kofi as a good man, a generous man, a man of peace. Uncle Kwaku wept so dramatically that some women shook their heads in admiration. But Mama Adjoa did not have energy for performance. She sat beside the coffin like a woman whose shadow had been cut away. After the burial, before the mourners had even finished eating, Uncle Kwaku called a family meeting. Not to comfort her. To remove her. He arrived with Efua, 2 nephews, and a man in dark glasses who claimed to be a property consultant. Mama Adjoa, he said with false softness, you know our customs. Since you and our brother had no child, this house must return to the family. Adjoa stared at him. Kofi said. Kofi is dead, Kwaku interrupted. The room went cold. Efua clicked her tongue. A widow should not argue with family elders. Adjoa looked toward the wooden trunk where Kofi used to keep documents. It was missing. Where is the trunk? She asked. Kwaku avoided her eyes. What trunk? The brown trunk from our bedroom. Efua smiled. Maybe your memory is also mourning. That was when Mama Adjoa understood. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a plan. They had entered the house while she was at the graveside. They had taken the trunk. They had taken the papers. They had taken her husband's voice from the room and now wanted to take her roof. She stood slowly. Kwaku feared God. He laughed. God did not give you children. Do not bring him into property matters. Then came the rain. Then came the thrown clothes. Then came the words that cut deeper than knives. You have no child. You have no root. You leave with nothing. Mama Adjoa spent that night under a torn plastic sheet behind Auntie Aba's vegetable stall. Auntie Aba was a round woman with a sharp tongue and a loyal heart. She had sold vegetables beside Adjoa for almost 40 years. When she found Mama Adjoa sitting in the rain, she shouted so loudly that the goats scattered. Are they mad? Have they eaten wickedness for supper? She dragged Adjoa into her stall, wrapped her in dry cloth, and made her drink hot ginger tea. You will sleep in my room, Auntie Aba said. No, Adjoa whispered. I do not want to trouble you. Aba put her hands on her hips. Woman, if you say that again, I will beat you with this bunch of garden eggs. Trouble is when wicked people prosper. Helping you is not trouble. Adjoa tried to smile, but tears came instead. For the first time since Kofi died, she cried loudly. Not the quiet tears of a widow trying to be strong. Deep tears. Old tears. Tears for the empty room. Tears for the children who had gone far away. Tears for the husband who had promised her a home. Tears for the town that saw her hands but never counted what those hands had done. Auntie Aba sat beside her and let her cry. Sometimes the most spiritual thing a person can do is not to preach, but to sit beside pain without running away. By morning, the whole market knew what had happened. Some traders were angry. Some were afraid. Some said, it is family matter. That sentence has buried many injustices. Uncle Kwaku moved quickly. He changed the locks on the house. He put a sign on the gate that read, property for sale. He told people the old woman had voluntarily left. He said she was confused with grief. He said the family had every legal right. But his biggest lie was still coming. 3 days later, Mama Adjoa was served with a court notice. Auntie Aba could not read English well, so she took it to a teacher. The teacher adjusted his glasses and frowned. It says Mama Adjoa is being accused of unlawfully occupying and attempting to claim family property. Auntie Aba nearly dropped her basket. Unlawfully occupying? The woman who lived there 35 years. The teacher continued. There will be a hearing in 14 days. If she cannot provide ownership documents, the family can proceed with sale. Mama Adjoa sat very still. 14 days. 14 days to prove a life. In the capital city, Kwame Dankwa sat in a glass office overlooking cranes, roads, and half-built towers. He was no longer the hungry boy behind the yam stall. He was the founder of Dankwa Urban Homes, a construction empire that built estates across West Africa. Newspapers called him a billionaire. Politicians called him honorable. Banks called him sir. But when he was alone, he still remembered the smell of Kantamire stew wrapped in leaves. On his desk sat an old drawing. A child's drawing of a house with a mango tree. His assistant entered with documents. Sir, we have a potential land acquisition in Akwansuo. Old family property. Good location. The local contact says the widow has vacated and the family wants a quick sale. Kwame looked up. Akwansuo? Yes, sir. He took the file. The first page had a photograph of the property. The mango tree was larger now. The walls were older. But Kwame knew that house before his mind had time to explain why. His hand began to shake. What is the address? The assistant told him. Kwame stood so suddenly that his chair rolled back. Who is selling this house? A man named Kwaku Mensah. He says he represents the family. Kwame's face changed. What about Mama Adjoa? The assistant looked confused. Who? Kwame did not answer. He was already reaching for his phone. In another city, inside a private hospital, Dr. Malik Mensah had just completed a difficult heart surgery. People called him the surgeon with blessed hands. He was calm under pressure, precise with instruments, and gentle with patients who could not pay. After surgery, he entered his office and found an old nurse waiting. Doctor, she said, you asked me to trace records from a Akwansuo clinic? I found something. Malik froze. For years, he had been searching for the woman who saved him. He had sent people to the market, but many old stalls had moved. He had asked about Adjoa Mensah, but some said she had died, others said she had traveled, and some knew nothing. The world is very good at hiding poor women. The nurse handed him a paper. There was a recent funeral notice for Kofi Mensah of Akwansuo. Survived by wife, Adjoa Mensah. But doctor. What? There is also a court notice. Some family dispute over property. Malik read it once. Then again. His jaw tightened. He touched the scar on his chest. Mama, he whispered. By evening, his driver had been told to prepare the car. In yet another city, Barrister Kojo Arma stood before a judge, defending a widow whose brothers-in-law had tried to seize her farm. He spoke calmly, but every word carried fire. My lord, Kojo said, custom cannot be used as a knife against the defenseless. Family cannot mean that a woman becomes furniture to be removed when a man dies. The judge ruled in favor of the widow. Outside the courtroom, an old clerk approached Kojo. Counselor, you once asked me to alert you about any cases from Akwansuo involving widows and property. Kojo turned. Yes. The clerk handed him a photocopy. Kojo read the name. Adjoa Mensah. For a moment, the world went silent. He saw the courthouse veranda of his childhood. He saw a woman asking what he was reading. He saw a bowl of rice placed before him. He saw Kofi laughing about frightening liars. Kojo looked at the case date. The hearing was in 2 days. He picked up his phone and called a number he had not used before, but had recently received through a mutual contact. Mr. Dankwa? He said when the line connected. My name is Kojo Arma. I believe we are both sons of the same woman. There was silence. Then Kwame's voice came, heavy with emotion. Mama Adjoa? Yes, Kojo said. They are trying to take her house. Another line joined hours later. Dr. Malik. For the first time in many years, the 3 boys who had slept under Mama Adjoa's roof heard one another breathe. They spoke late into the night. They compared memories. Kwame remembered the earrings she sold. Malik remembered the cracked hands. Kojo remembered the second-hand law books wrapped in brown paper. They discovered what success had hidden from each of them. Each had tried to find her. Each had failed in a different way. Each had carried guilt like a stone in the chest. Kojo said, we do not have time for guilt now. We have 48 hours. Kwame said, I will stop the sale. Malik said, I will come with you. Kojo said, and I will bring the law. But there was still one missing piece. Pa Kofi's sealed letter. Yes, sir. Do you have documents? I have a sealed letter, Biney said. And copies of a trust draft. I was ill. I could not return in time. I have regretted it every day. Where are you? In Cape Coast, but I can travel. You are not strong, Kojo said. I am strong enough to correct a wrong, Biney replied. And so fate gathered its witnesses. Back in Akwansuo, Mama Adjoa knew nothing of these movements. The day before court, she went alone to the locked gate of her house. The mango tree rustled above her. The property sale sign leaned against the wall. Someone had painted a red mark near the gate, perhaps to measure where demolition would begin. She touched the gate. Kofi, she whispered, I tried. A voice behind her said, tried what? To steal our house. It was Efua. She stood with two young men and smiled. You are still coming here? Old woman, shame is also a cloth. Wear it and cover yourself. Mama Adjoa turned slowly. I came to greet the house. Efua laughed. Hear her. Greeting cement. One of the young men snickered. Efua stepped closer. Tomorrow the court will finish this matter. After that, if we see you near this gate, we will call the police. Mama Adjoa looked at her for a long time. When you were small, she said softly, you used to run into my kitchen and ask for fried plantain. Your mother would say you had eaten already, but I always gave you one more piece. Efua's smile faltered for half a second. Then pride returned. So, did plantain make you my mother? No, Adjoa said. It only made me foolish enough to believe kindness is remembered. Efua's face hardened. Kindness without children is nothing. Tomorrow you will learn that. She walked away. Mama Adjoa remained at the gate until sunset. That night, Auntie Aba prepared banku, but Adjoa could barely eat. You need strength for court, Aba said. What will I say there? Adjoa asked. That I loved a man? That I cooked? That I prayed? That I fed children who left? Courts want papers, not tears. Auntie Aba sat opposite her. Then give them truth. Maybe truth has feet we cannot see. Adjoa looked at her old friend. Do you really believe that? Aba shrugged. At dawn, the sky was dark again. Clouds gathered over Akwansuo like old witnesses returning. Mama Adjoa wore a faded black dress and tied her headscarf carefully. Auntie Aba pinned it for her. Today, Aba said, do not lower your head. My neck is tired, Adjoa whispered. Then let my anger hold it up. They walked to court together. The courthouse was already crowded. Uncle Kwaka had made sure of it. He wanted the town to see him win. He arrived in a white smock holding a folder of documents. Efua wore sunglasses though there was no sun. The property consultant stood nearby, speaking quietly into his phone. Some relatives looked at Mama Adjoa and smirked. One said loudly, where are her children today? Another answered, maybe they are invisible. Laughter moved through the crowd. Mama Adjoa gripped Auntie Aba's arm. Inside the courtroom, the ceiling fans turned lazily. The wooden benches creaked. The air smelled of damp paper and old arguments. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The case began. Uncle Kwaka's lawyer spoke first. He was polished, confident, and cold. My lord, this is a simple matter. The late Kofi Mensah died without biological issue. The property in question is family property. The respondent, his widow, has no documentary proof of ownership and is attempting to delay the lawful transfer of property to the family. Mama Adjoa listened as her life was reduced to a legal inconvenience. The lawyer continued. She has been treated with respect. The family has offered her time to relocate. But she now seeks to create confusion. Auntie Abia muttered, respect? May mosquitoes respect his ears tonight. The judge looked up. Silence in court. Uncle Kwaku's lawyer submitted documents. A family declaration. A property statement. A sale agreement. Mama Adjoa's heart sank. She had no papers. The judge turned to her. Madam Adjoa Mensah, do you have legal representation? She stood slowly. No, my lord. Do you have documents to support your claim? Her mouth opened. No words came. Uncle Kwaku leaned back with satisfaction. Efua smiled. The courtroom waited. Mama Adjoa looked at the judge and said the only thing she had. My lord, I lived in that house with my husband for 35 years. I helped build it. He told me it was mine. He told me. Kwaku's lawyer stood. My lord, with respect, verbal statements cannot override family property documents. The judge nodded slightly. Madam, the court requires evidence. Evidence. Such a small word. Such a heavy stone. Mama Adjoa lowered herself back onto the bench. Auntie Aba held her hand. Outside, thunder rolled. The judge began reviewing the documents. The courtroom grew quiet. Then, from outside, came a sound that did not belong to ordinary court mornings. Engines. Not one. Several. Deep, smooth engines rolling into the courtyard. People near the windows turned. A murmur rose. Uncle Kwaku frowned. The judge looked up. What is happening outside? The clerk moved to the door, opened it slightly and froze. In the courtyard, 3 black cars had arrived. The first was a long luxury SUV, polished like a mirror. The second was a dark sedan with official plates. The third was another SUV followed by a small convoy. Doors opened. A tall man in a tailored suit stepped out first. His face was familiar to anyone who read business newspapers. Kwame Dankwa. The builder. The billionaire whose company had changed skylines. Behind him came a man in a simple dark suit, carrying a doctor's bag though he looked too important to carry anything himself. Dr. Malik Mensah, the heart surgeon whose name had been praised on radio after saving a minister's life. The third man stepped out holding a leather folder. Barrister Kojo Arma. The lawyer known for defending widows, workers, and people whose voices were too poor to be heard. But the crowd did not yet understand. Why were these men here? What did they want in a small-town property case? The courtroom door opened. All 3 men entered. The room changed. Some people stood without knowing why. Uncle Kwaku's lawyer turned pale. Kojo walked forward and bowed to the judge. My lord, apologies for the interruption. I am Barrister Kojo Arma. I request permission to appear for Madam Adjoa Mensah. Mama Adjoa stopped breathing. That voice. Older. Deeper. But somewhere inside it was the boy who had read newspapers on the courthouse veranda. Kojo turned slowly. His eyes met hers. For one moment he was not a lawyer. He was a hungry boy again. He walked toward her. The courtroom watched. Uncle Kwaku whispered, "What is this?" Kojo reached Mama Adjoa, then lowered himself to his knees. Not on a carpet. Not on clean tile. On the dusty courtroom floor. Mama, he said, voice breaking, forgive me. I came late. A sound went through the room like wind through dry leaves. Mama Adjoa lifted both hands to her mouth. Kojo. Before she could touch him, the second man came forward. Dr. Malik knelt beside Kojo. He took her cracked hand and pressed it to his forehead. Mama, he whispered, these hands saved my life. Malik, she cried. Then Kwame came. The billionaire builder walked past elders, lawyers, relatives, and curious townspeople. He removed his expensive watch, as if wealth had no right to shine in that moment, and knelt in front of the woman they had called Baron. Mama Adjoa, he said, tears running freely down his face, you fed me when I had no name. You gave me a roof when I had no road. You sold your earrings for my school fees. I promised to build you a home the world could not throw you out of. I have come to keep my promise. The courtroom erupted. Some people cried out. Some clapped before remembering they were in court. Auntie Abia shouted, "Hey! Truth has feet." The judge banged his gavel. Order. Order in court. But even the judge's eyes had softened. Mama Adjoa touched each face like a blind woman confirming a miracle. Kwame. Malik. Kojo. The boys she had fed. The boys the town did not count. The boys who had become men the whole country counted. Uncle Kwaku stood up, trembling with anger. "My lord, this is emotional theater. These men are not biological children. They have no standing." Kojo rose slowly. His tears were gone now. The lawyer had returned. "My lord," he said, "the applicant is correct about one thing. This case is not about emotion alone. It is about documents. And we have brought them." The property consultant began edging toward the door. Kwame's security man quietly blocked him. Kojo opened his folder. "My lord, first, we challenge the authenticity of the alleged family property documents submitted by the applicant. Second, we have evidence that the property sale agreement was created before the late Kofi Mensah was buried, suggesting premeditated dispossession. Third, a key witness has arrived with original documents and a sealed letter from the deceased." The courtroom door opened again. An elderly man entered with the help of a walking cane and a young assistant. His face was thin. His steps were slow. But his eyes were clear. "Lawyer Bani." Mama Adjoa whispered his name. Bani bowed to the court. "My lord, I apologize for my frailty. But I could not let a dead man's truth be buried by living greed." The courtroom went silent. Bani lifted a brown envelope. "This letter was written by the late Kofi Mensah in my presence. It was sealed and kept with draft trust documents. I was instructed to complete the registration process, but illness took me away. That delay is my burden. Today I have come to correct it." The judge ordered the letter submitted. Kojo requested permission to read it aloud. Uncle Kwaku's lawyer objected, but weakly. The judge allowed it. Kojo opened the envelope carefully. Mama Adjoa began to tremble. For a moment she smelled Kofi's old shirt. She heard his cough. She felt his hand around hers. Kojo read. "To whoever reads this after my death, let it be known that my wife, Adjoa Mensah, is not a stranger in my house. She is the heart of it. We built this house together with sweat, hunger, patience, and prayer. No relative of mine has the right to drive her out." A murmur moved through the room. Kojo continued. "People called my wife barren, but I testify that many children lived because she refused to let them die. The law may ask for names. The world may ask for blood. But God asks who showed mercy." Mama Adjoa covered her face. Kwame bowed his head. Malik wiped his eyes. Kojo's voice shook, but he continued. "I have instructed lawyer Bini to secure this house in Adjoa's name and begin the formation of a trust called the Forgotten Children's House. After Adjoa, the house must never be sold for greed. It must shelter children who have no shelter, feed children who have no food, and teach them that being forgotten by people does not mean being forgotten by God." Auntie Abia was crying openly now. Even some relatives lowered their eyes. Kojo read the final lines. "To my brother Kwaku, if you are hearing this, remember that family is not a mouth that eats inheritance. Family is a hand that protects the vulnerable. Do not fight my widow. Fear God. To my wife Adjoa, if they ever make you feel empty, remember my last words. You were never empty. You were a mother in the way heaven counts motherhood." The courtroom was silent. Not quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that follows truth when lies have been speaking too long. The judge removed his glasses and looked at Uncle Kwaku. "Mr. Mensah, did you know of this letter?" Kwaku swallowed. "No, my lord." Lawyer Bini spoke. "My lord, I informed him after the funeral that documents existed. He told me the widow had already agreed to leave. Later I discovered she had not." Kojo turned to the property consultant. "And you, sir, how did you obtain authority to market the property?" The man stammered. "I was told the family agreed." "By whom?" He looked at Kwaku. The whole room turned. Kwaku's knees seemed to weaken. Kojo placed another document on the table. My lord, we also have handwriting analysis indicating that the signature on the so-called family declaration does not match the late Kofi Mensah's known signature. We request investigation for forgery, unlawful eviction, and attempted fraudulent sale. Efua stood abruptly. This is nonsense. She is still barren. These men are not her blood. The words flew out before wisdom could stop them. Doctor. Malik turned toward her. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner. When I was a child dying beside a road, blood relatives did not come. She came. When my chest wound needed medicine, blood relatives did not pay. She paid. When fever took my breath at midnight, blood relatives did not sit awake. She sat. If blood is only what is born, then many people have blood and no heart. Kwame added, you call her barren because you cannot count what she planted. Kojo looked at the judge. My lord, this woman may not have biological children, but she has witnesses. Living witnesses. And today we stand not to take property, but to protect the truth of a man's will and the dignity of a widow. The judge adjourned briefly to review the documents. Nobody left. Outside the rain began again. But this time nobody threw Mama Adjoa into it. The three men helped her sit. Auntie Aba stood beside them like a proud commander. She looked at Uncle Kwaku and said, you asked where her children were. Should we count them slowly or quickly? Nobody laughed at Mama Adjoa now. That is one of life's saddest truths. When court resumed, the judge's ruling was careful but firm. The attempted sale was suspended immediately. The eviction was declared improper pending full investigation. The documents submitted by Kwaku were referred for forensic examination. Mama Adjoa was restored to lawful occupation of the house while the trust documentation was reviewed and completed. And because evidence of possible fraud had emerged, the court ordered further inquiry into Uncle Kwaku, the property consultant, and anyone involved in forging or concealing documents. Uncle Kwaku shouted that the court was being influenced by rich men. The judge looked at him coldly. No, Mr. Mensah. The court is being influenced by evidence. Those words traveled through Akwansuo before sunset. By evening, the same compound that had seen Mama Adjoa's clothes thrown into the mud was full again. But this time the gate was open for her. Kwame walked beside her, holding an umbrella over her head. Malik carried her small bag. Kojo held the walking stick that had belonged to Kofi. Auntie Abia led the way, announcing to anyone who could hear, "Make way. The owner of the house is coming home." People gathered. Some clapped. Some cried. Some looked ashamed. Mama Adjoa stopped at the doorway. Her hand touched the wooden frame. For a moment she could not enter. Too much had happened there. Loss. Humiliation. Hope. Kwame whispered, "Mama?" She looked toward the mango tree. The rain had washed the leaves clean. "I wish Kofi could see this," she said. Kojo lifted the walking stick. "He saw it before we did. That is why he wrote the letter." Inside the house, Efua's borrowed pride had left traces everywhere. Cupboards were open. Kofi's chair had been moved. Some of Adjoa's things were missing. But the walls still remembered her. She walked to the kitchen and placed her hand on the old stove. "This is where Kwame stole meat from the soup," she said. Kwame looked offended. "I did not steal. I was testing if it was cooked." Malik laughed. "You tested it every day." Kojo added, "and blamed me." For the first time since Kofi died, Mama Adjoa laughed from her belly. The sound filled the house like a lamp being lit. But justice was not finished. In the weeks that followed, truth continued to rise. The handwriting report confirmed that Kofi's signature had been forged. The property consultant confessed that Uncle Kwaku had promised him a share after the sale. Efua returned the headscarf and the household things she had taken. Uncle Kwaku blamed grief, custom, and confusion, but none of those words could wash mud from a guilty hand. Mama Adjoa did not ask for revenge, but she asked for consequence. Revenge says, suffer because I suffered, she told Kwame. Consequence says, learn so others do not suffer. So Kwaka faced the law. The false sale was cancelled. Efua stood before the market women and admitted what she had done. Then Mama Adjoa gave her one more lesson. She told Efua to work at the new children's home for 6 months, not as humiliation but as education. Kwame wanted to build Mama Adjoa a mansion but she refused. I do not need rooms that echo, she said. Build rooms where children can sleep. So the old compound became something beautiful. The mango tree stayed. Kofi's chair was repaired and placed in the hall. New bedrooms were built behind the house. Malik funded a small clinic where no child would be turned away for lack of money. Kojo opened a legal aid desk near the gate for widows and orphans cheated with papers. They named the place exactly as Kofi had wished. The Forgotten Children's House. On the day of the dedication, a Kwansuo gathered again. This time not for a funeral. Not for humiliation. For restoration. Mama Adjoa wore a simple white dress and a blue headscarf. Children stood before her in neat rows, some shy, some smiling, some still unsure whether kindness could be trusted. Kwame, Malik and Kojo stood behind her, no longer lost boys but living proof. Kwame said, people call me a builder but before I built houses Mama Adjoa built me. Malik said, this woman taught me that a heart is not for beating only. It is for making room. Kojo said, when you educate an abandoned child, you may be educating the hand that will one day defend your dignity. Then Mama Adjoa lifted her weathered hands. These hands never held a baby from my womb, she said. But they held many children from the edge of despair. A child is not always born from the body. Sometimes a child is born from mercy. Sometimes family begins with a bowl of rice. Sometimes inheritance is not land but love. The crowd wept. After the ceremony, a thin little boy came to her and asked, are you the woman who takes children nobody wants? Mama Adjoa knelt slowly though her knees hurt. No, my child, she said. I am the woman who tells children that somebody wants them. Can I stay? She opened her arms. That is why the gate is open. Across the courtyard, Kwame whispered, it begins again. Kojo shook his head gently. No. It continues. And that is how the woman they called barren became mother to a house full of children. So remember this, fate may be quiet but it is not blind. Kindness may be delayed in reward but it is never wasted. The hands that feed the forgotten will never be forgotten by fate. That is the story of Mama Adjoa Mensa. The woman 3 billionaires called mother.